Alright, everybody. Today I'm going to show you how my method for truing crankshafts, two-stroke crankshafts. This is for Lambretta. Lambrettas that's what I do. That's what I look for. However, all two-stroke crankshafts still have the same principle with a pressed pin. Even if you don't know what a Lambretta is, it makes no difference. You've got a pin that is press fit, and you've got a gap between the whole thing. So the pin is pressed into each individual web, each individual piece. And this pin, these two pieces must be perfect. They have to be absolutely perfect. So what we do is you have to true, which basically just means whack on it scientifically to get it to run perfectly true on the bearing faces. Now some people, you can do it. I have a lathe, and what I do, people have said about using these center holes, and you put it in the lathe on the center holes and then run it that way. What I've found though is that can be inaccurate, especially if you're tapping the crank out with a hammer here. You can get burrs on the sides. Yeah, it may not, if you put it in there and it's got a burr on it, it's going to continually wobble a thousandth of an inch every time. So what really matters is the bearing faces, where the bearings run, or even the seals right next to it. That should be accurate enough. Basically, both these bearing faces is what really makes the difference. That's where it's running, not out through these centers. So I prefer to use the bearing faces themselves, which is going to give you the truest indication of how it's actually running. Now, a lot of people, when it comes to crank truing, a lot of people say, oh, I know an old timer, he does it in 2 minutes, bam, gives it right back to you, done. Other people say it's some kind of weird voodoo. No one knows how to do it. Don't try it. It's terrible. You never do it. It's impossible. I think a lot of that has to do with what you're actually trying to do and your method. So I have a method that I've read a ton from, all kinds of dirt bike stuff to actual Lambretta stuff to you name it, two-stroke crankshaft. I just studied a bunch of stuff to figure out what's going on. So I have a method I call it the Quadrant Method. So what I'm doing is I'm dividing the crank in half this way, and I'm dividing the crank in half this way, because it can only be out 4 different ways. Now imagine this crank here. I'm going to use my hands. If the crank's here, you got two wheels. If the pin's at the top, let's always put the pin at the 12 o'clock position. You got 12, 3, 9, 12. You get it. So let's put it at the 12 o'clock position. Now, if the pin's there, it can be out 2 ways this way. It can actually be, the pin's at the top, it can be too close, or it can be that way. So either way, as it spins, it's going to flip the opposite way, which leads to your 2 crank arms giving a butterfly effect as it runs, which leads to vibration. The other way, it depends at the top. You spin it that way, it can be off this way. Now if it's off that way, basically you're going to get a running back and forth. Now mix that with the other, and then you're just all over the place. Excess vibration leads the vibration of the bike itself. It also soaks up power by just absorbing all this. It can destroy bearings. What we want to do is we want to true both sides every which way to within a thousandth of an inch at the bearing and seal faces. So I came up with the idea of I've now trued maybe half a dozen cranks. So I'm still a bit new at it. I'm pressing them out. I put them together. And I have rod kits on order. This is January 19th something. So within a couple weeks I should have a bunch of cranks, a bunch of con rod kits, be replacing them. One thing that I want to talk about is the Tig Welds. You can see right there that this one is Tig welded. This side is not. Many people, including the race book, the two-stroke race book, all that, say do not weld. Many other places say weld. I've found 3 arguments for not welding, 3 arguments against welding. Against welding is that one thing is how do you get it back apart. Now you can use a little grinder, a little Dremel, and grind those welds out, and you're good. But chances are you're going to nick something. It's not going to be, and it's going to cost more. Someone's going to have to sit there and grind these welds off before they can press it out. That's going to cost money. So the next rebuild, the first rebuild will be cheap because just tack it in. The next rebuild is going to be substantially more because you're going to have to pay somebody the time to grind all this out. That's one, is how to get it apart. The second one is when it cools. Anytime you heat up metal and cool it, it tends to distort even just a touch. Since we're working within a thousandth of an inch here, once you heat it up due to the weld and let it cool, it can actually knock it out again. As it cools, it can knock it out a thousandth or two. Now, not much, but a bit. The counter argument to that is you can still whack it into place with welds. You just need to, you're going to have to be quite forceful with it. But if it's out a thousandth of an inch, chances are you can put it right back into a thousandth of an inch, even with the welds. The other, and this would be much more for high performance, high RPM, high horsepower guys, is that the welding, the heating up of the metal, at least this is what my 2-stroke racing book says, I don't know. They say every time you're heating up the metal, you can actually create, I believe, hardening the metal, you can create stress fractures. So the actual webs are weakened as far as being able to take the forces that are being put on it. So that should be taken into account if you're constantly running at 10,000 RPM and racing this thing. You may want to think about that. My main argument, my main point, I like to weld the cranks TIG welded, because once you TIG weld these, there's no possibility of them spinning. It's just not going to happen because you've got them welded. That's good up to much higher horsepowers. The book that I have, the race book, says to Loctite them. So you basically smear the pin with Loctite, press it in, true it, and then the Loctite holds it well enough. As well as the interference fit from, I believe it's, my friend was saying about 3/1000ths. Basically it's 3/1000ths too big. You press it in, it takes a lot of force, and now it stays. Lambretta specifically, due to the amount of, you can see that's actually only about the size of my pinky. That's not really a lot of metal on the web to be grabbing the pin. Compare that to a modern KX crank, and it's like double the width. I mean, it's a lot wider, so the pins are very longer, and that's a lot more grabbing surface, so they're less prone to twisting. Lambrettas have this severe restriction on this. You just don't have enough metal to grip it. So let's go over to, I have a truing stand here, and I do have a crank on there, which I have looked at. I just pressed this together and I need to fix it. Let me see if I can show you the crank truing stand that I have. It's terrible at that. So I built it. I'm using Pistra, which as an electrician I use a lot of this for mounting things on the outside. The cool part, if I can show you here, is this piece in here is actually, the P strut nuts are actually designed to sit in this area, and what it does is when I loosen this bolt up, it actually makes the whole piece adjustable, so I can do anything I want, any type of 2-stroke crank that I'm trying to do here. Now let's make sure that I have, you know what, I decided I was going to go this way. Let's show this in practice. Now, depending on how good you are at this, you can, sometimes these go quick, sometimes take longer. I'm not going to do the whole thing, I'm just going to show you what I basically do. And I forgot to show you some tools. One is a brass hammer. Brass is a softer metal, so when I hit it, it doesn't dent the crank, it dents the hammer. And this is a 2.5 pound one. I think I got off eBay for like 25 bucks. It's relatively cheap for what you're doing. You also need a dial indicator. I bought this dead blow hammer with the sand in it. That appears to be a complete waste of time as far as I can tell. So I don't use that. The other is with cranks, I also will use a C-clamp to clamp it tighter if necessary. or I have this rubber coated wood chisel that I can go in between the webs to hammer down on it and spread them a bit. So what I'm going to do, this is one, like I said, I just pressed together. Hopefully we can see it, but I'll give you the commentary on it anyway. Now I'm running on a bearing face. Actually, I'm running on a seal face and a bearing face here. But considering that both of those would be perfectly round anyway, it should be good. So what I'm doing is I'm running on the bearing face on this side. And what I'm going to do is spin it. Now, sometimes I zero it, sometimes I just talk it out here with negatives and positives of 0. Right now it's 0 with the pin at 12 o'clock. If you can see that. So the pin's at 12. So the first thing I'm going to do is, in terms of with the pin, let's see if I can do that. The pin being, with the crank being too close at the pin or too far away at the bottom here, that's all I really care about. So what I'm doing, the reason I call it the Quadrant Method, is I'm going to take it in quarters. So basically I'm looking at that. Now that is currently is at -1. Then I go there, I'm at a little over 0. At the bottom, I'm actually at 6, positive 6. At the back, I'm actually at 4. And then when I get back up to the bottom, I'm at -1. So let me re-zero that. And let's do it again. In front of me is +1. Below me is +6. Behind is +5 now. And the top is 0. So the way I do it, right, is because we're pivoting it on the seal face here. The lowest end out here, what I look for is always the lowest reading, because the pivoting is here. So if it's the lowest out on there, that means, because we're pivoting in the middle, this web, which is the same one, I hope you guys can see that. So I'm looking at the same web. This is the flywheel side that I'm using, which is the longest run, which will be by far the most accurate. The longer the shaft you have, if you have like a 10-foot shaft and you zero the end of that, it's tight here. So what I'm using is the longest end of the shaft. I'm looking for the lowest end, because the lowest end pivoting it in the middle means that this web is actually too high. So you got to work actually backwards. So we're looking to work backwards. So the lowest end. So let's just run it again. At this case, that's 0, and that's +6. So if that's +6, that means it's higher here, which means that this must be sitting this way. So in order to break it out, unfortunately, I've got to do the chisel area. It's much easier to use the C-clamp to compress them. Unfortunately, that's not my case here. I should have used a different crank so it'd be easier for myself. So this is higher, meaning that the two webs are closer here. So I'm going to have to spread those webs on the pin itself. So what I'm going to do, I could certainly use a perfectus method. I'm basically just going to lay on the ground with the pin at the bottom, grab my hammer. Actually, I normally use the sledgehammer for this since I'm not directly hitting the crank. And I put the chisel between the webs and give a heavy blow. Now, put it back in. Now at the top, I'm +1. At the bottom, I'm 1. Actually, it appears that I've gone 1/1000th too far, but I'm within 1. I'm not going to worry anymore about it. Now, let's do the other one. That's actually pretty close, because normally I sit here for like a half hour doing that. That's good. Now, let's go in front to the pin being at me, like in front, closest to me and farthest away. So now, closest to me, I'm at 0. Farthest away from me is actually 1. So it actually, that's not even good. I was hoping to be farther out. I'm actually 1.5 thousandths right now. I don't know if you can see this. As it is, I'm just a hair off. But let's do it. So it's towards me. I'm at 0. Away from me, I'm at +1. So again, I'm always looking for the lowest end That's just how it makes sense to me. So the lowest end here means the highest piece of the web. So what I do is I always look for the lowest end. So away from me is 1/1000th, actually like 1 1/4, 1 and whatever, 1 1/8. Towards me is 0. So this is the lowest. This is the lowest end. So if it's lowest at the end, it means that this has to be the highest. So I need to whack down on it. That's why I'm always hitting the flywheel side. This side, I'm always hitting this side. I never hit the other side, always this side. And I'm always hitting the lowest reading. So if it's lowest here, it means it's highest here. So I want to whack down on it. So in this case, let me double check because I'm talking. That's 0. That's +1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the 0, which is my lowest, and I'm going to hit this web, the flywheel web, and I'm going to whack it down. Chances are I'll also throw the other section out, which is where it gets annoying. So pin is towards me. So the pin is towards me, and I need to whack the flywheel side down. So now 1/1000ths, maybe just that. Maybe just a good whack with a brass hammer. So that's 0. That's 1 1/2. That's, now I've actually done it worse here. That is -1. So again, that's the lowest. Well, that's the lowest now, which means, I'll tell you what that means, is that I actually hit it too hard. So now I've gone too far. That this is now the highest, the pin towards me, which was just the lowest. Now this is 1 1/2. And that is -1. So now because that's the lowest, I'm going to take it out, hold the flywheel, hit it far less now, because apparently this crank moves pretty easily. Let's just try just a nice little whack. Let me get it. Let's read in -1. So oddly enough, there was no change, which that happens very often. So that's -1. So again, that's my lowest. This time you guys got the idea. A good whack. That's -1. Again, no change. So now that's, again, my lowest. Was the pin away from me. That was quite a whack, actually. Now I probably knocked it too far out the other way. Now I'm way up there somehow. Let's zero this again quick. So now away towards me is 0. Away from me is -2. So -2, of course, is being the lowest. Hey, missed it. So that's -3. And that's 0. So -3. Basically, all you're going to do is just keep doing this until you get it right. I actually started out with it pretty quick. That's -3. It's about 0, so I need to whack it again. So it's -3. Again, always hitting that end on the lowest. That's a little less than -3. That's a little less than -1. So now I'm only 2/1000ths out. But again, I'm still the same way. So that's my lowest end. I assume you guys can't really see that. I apologize for that. So that's the pin away from me, and I'm at about -2.5. That's just how I think about it. Whatever works. Sometimes I'll go in the 60s, the 30s. Doesn't make a difference to me. I know that probably knocked it right out. So that's again -3, and it's -1/2. I don't really want to make a 3-hour video if this takes me forever, but if I can get it pretty close. Now that's within 2 thousandths, which is unacceptable yet. But again, I don't want to make a super long video. So away from me is at 0. Towards me is +2. So right now I'm within 2 thousandths. Now let's check the other way, because again it's quadrant. So you're always doing 180. So I'm doing towards me, away from me. Now I'm going to do top. Reads +1. And negative, and below me reads +2. So that's actually only out. Again, because I'm using, that's actually, let's see, the bottom is higher. And the top, when the pin's at the top, it's lower. So if it's lower right now, that means it has to be sitting that way, which means that, again, the webs are too close together. So I'm going to have to spread them again and then continue working. Now this is, you know, one of the guys that do the racing stuff. This is actually, as I spin it, within 2 thousandths. I'll tell you, there's probably a lot more cranks out there that are running far more run out than that. That's of course still unacceptable to me. 2 thousandths is unacceptable. So I'm going to keep working with this. But like I said, I don't want to make an actual 1 hour video. I'm already at 20 minutes. Way too long. So I apologize for that. I'm going to get out of here. But using the quadrant method and how it works, hopefully this makes sense. And maybe it can help somebody if they're trying to true cranks or need to at least check their cranks and see what's going on. Alright, so hopefully that helps somebody.